I've been looking at this painting for a few days now, and we're now at the point of finishing the cat and then doing a little bit of detail, maybe, we'll see, to bring the cat out a little bit. There's a few things that are bothering me a little bit. I'm feeling like it's a little too dark down in here, that maybe I need to lift a little tiny bit down in there. So I'll do that first so that then it'll be dry once I finish the cat. All right, so we're going to do a little lifting there. A couple of rags. I don't want to lift down in that lower part there because that's the shadow side, but this area up here has quite a bit of light on it, and it just felt like it got too dark. And it might be that we want a little tiny bit of brown to go back into there too. So then we can lift a little more right on that edge. So I'm just rubbing fairly hard with my brush to loosen the paint that's on the surface. Okay, and this guy here is the wrong angle if he's going to be a turn of the tile. And then these guys, let's just lift out a little bit on the wings. I'll probably do a dark line around the outside edge of that. Okay. All right, all right, all right. Now, we'll do the eyes last. I'm debating on that. You know, do we do the eyes last? Do we do the eyes first? So I need a gray because I'm going to do like I did on our first trial. And do I want that gray with ultramarine blue or with phthalo blue? Let's do it with the phthalo. So I'm mixing phthalo blue with burnt sienna to get a neutral gray. And in some places that gray is going to be a little more blue than other places. At some places it's going to be a little lighter. And I need a big enough puddle here. And I can thin it some when I put it on. I can add a little brown to it, and maybe we can make another pile over here that's a brown gray. I'm seeing a little brownness in the gray on the tail, but it's a little more blue when it's up closer to her face. So we have 3 shades of gray here: a blue gray, brown gray, and a fairly neutral gray. Okay, now, is this brush going to be too big or just right? And whiskers, do I want to try and let them stand out? There's a sweetness to that feeling of those whiskers. And then up into there. This is going to come down right next to her eyes. I might need a smaller brush here. And this comes down around her eye there. I'm just pulling some of that paint out of there. And it comes down around just into there. Okay. Now, there's a lightness on the edge of her ear, so I'm going to leave that behind. It's a little lighter gray and a little bluer gray as we come up into here. So let's just add a little blue to that. Come back into the neutral gray, work my way across. Her ear is relatively dark here against that background. I'm going to have to soften that other edge, but I'm going to wait on that for a sec. And this comes just on the underside of her eye. Her eye is actually a little rounder than I had. There we go. Some light inside that ear. So let's leave some of that behind. No whiskers up in here on this side, which is interesting that there's only whiskers on the one side. She must have gray whiskers on this other side. And this comes down, and she's got a, let's just add a little brown to this. Okay, so now that that's drying a little bit, I can pick up the edge of this. Add a little, no, I don't want to add, we'll leave it with the blue. I'm seeing just, maybe it's just a little bit of light on the edge of that ear. And I'm going to come back in and do some more dark on there later. This is going to come up. So I'm just getting her local color put in. So this is her local color. And now she has her white fur is sort of overlapping onto this space, so I want to leave a feeling of that and still keep the shape of this thing going. And then pick up this, take it on back in here. And then when it gets to the other edge of this space, we're going to have the same thing. We're going to have a little bit of the fur show into there. So we have to leave a little bit of thin lines behind. Okay, and now she has another patch that runs behind. There's that leg. There's that leg. Here's this foot, this here. Okay, get a little fur on that. She's got another patch right back here. And once again, we've got little fine lines. Now this is something that, you know, I could have been using maybe a slightly smaller brush to get these fine lines, but the tip on this is pretty darn good, and I'm getting it pretty well. But I need to go back this other way. When you go to do lines with your brush, when you set it down, you get sort of a big spot. You get a big spot, and then you can pull skinny lines off of that big spot. So that's why I'm going backwards here. I'm coming into the body of this, and then pulling those skinny lines back out into her body. Let's see here now. And up in here, let's see, that's all the way up to about there. We really get a lot of this up in this area. And then the tail will mix in, and then it gets a little more of a brownish feel to it. into there. There's a little feeling of that. Oh, yeah, nice. And then I can take a little bit of this darker against that background. It will dry a little lighter than what I've got. So let's just get a little thicker paint. A little thicker paint down in here. I may have to come back and drop that in later. It's a little bit wettish. And I've changed her tail so it goes up. I see this cat every day. She's one of our household cats, and she does frequently have her tail up. Seems like she's always in a good mood. Okay, now let me come back in and get just a little bit darker on her ear in here. I wanted to let that dry a little bit so that when I came in to do this, it wouldn't flood into everything else quite so much, because I didn't want it to flood into everything. But she's a little darker in here, down to that eye. I'm just sort of putting little furry kind of marks here so that it will look furry. And then she's a darker inside of that ear and across here, and her whiskers came across through that. She has some sort of whiskery areas coming out of her ears up there too, but and I'm going to soften that a little bit. Okay, I think that's got that. Oh, and then she has this almost black nose. I think we can put that in there now. And she has a little gray beauty mark down on her chin here. And dark underneath there. All right. So now, I can't paint up onto those, but I can paint other areas here. And we are now going to have a blue-gray for the shadow area. So she has a little shadow here, a little shadow back behind there. I'm going to have to come back in and remove some of this water. I have too much on there now. And I'll dry that almost completely and do a little softening on this side where it comes out into, okay, slightly more blue. She has a foot underneath of here. And let me just paint right out into the dark area next to it. And then that's going to go across that foot and up into this area here. So the shadowing on her body is sort of this delicate little thing. It has to be a mid-tone gray. I'll get a value card on there in a minute. It has to be a mid-tone gray or it's not going to look like it's shadow. And so it always sort of surprises us when we're painting white, a white object like this, a white critter, that how dark we have to actually make those shadow areas to make them work. And I didn't get the shape of her foot very good when I did it before. So what did I screw up? That was what I screwed up. Okay, let me try this. And now this is all shadow area here, and yes, that's dry enough. I can paint over it. If that was still wet, as soon as I painted over it, it would bleed into everything else. And of course now my color that I put in here is different. So I'm going to have to put a little bit of a brown shade onto there. Let's see, this shape comes up and goes into a little shape right back there. Okay. And now let's just put a little brownish gray in on top of here. Oh, but you know, I can do something really quite interesting with this when I do. There's you can see her furriness back here, and by painting this a little bit darker, I can get 2 layers in there and get some of that furriness showing. Do I like that? Now, I'm going to need to let that dry. Let's see, this is not as bright white as up above. So I need to have just a wee touch of color on there. Now I'm feeling like I need to come back and address my feeling of a little bit of brown back in here, because I still sort of like some brownish colors back in here. And then there's a shadow that comes off of her tail and into this area there. Sort of merge down onto that shadow area. Now, is that dried enough? I'm feeling like I need to go darker behind her right there. And since we're working with blue already, so I'm going to put it darker right next to her and then grade it up out of there. It was that bowl before and it's not any longer, but let's see what we can do about leaving this really soft looking. You know, when you first put this stuff down, you don't really know for sure what you're going to do with it. You know, when I did the painting the other week, I didn't have a clear idea of how we were going to go forward with this. And now that I've got this in here, I can see a little better what perhaps needs to happen. And we can change some of these things just a little bit by, once it's dry, you can see we get nice hard edges on things. And Then I want to grade this down because I still want to keep that very soft in there. And then I want to grade the top of these so that it can just sort of grade out in and still look wet and wet, even though we didn't do it wet and wet. We did it wet on dry. And that's almost too late there. Let's just add some more paint into this. Picked up a little bit of green to add into there. And if I do this gently, I can come in on top of what I've already painted and just drag it across there without a problem. And then let's go a little darker back in this area over here as well. And if we want to come in and get a feeling of some of those leaves, I can paint around them just a little bit. Just get a hint of leaves. And just let that come out into there just a little bit with those hints without just trying to sort of leaf shape but not get too complicated with it. And then if I'm going to do that, this is dried enough yet? Not really. Okay. And that hard edge there, I'm going to need a hard edge over here as well. There. That's better. Just bring that down in there. Otherwise, I was feeling like I forgot to finish that. And then we could come back in with one of my greens here. That sap green. Make that a little more really green. I'm still trying to keep very simple with this. And then let's go a little bit darker in here. One thing that happens when you've got water, and I can't really see it now that I did that pencil line on there, is that quite often you have a dark, when water hits an edge, you end up with a dark space when it touches that because it's wetting it. Or you end up with a little light line because there's reflected light coming out of the space. And so finding that just a little bit here, and I'm also seeing a shadow underneath the edge of that tile that is there. And let me take that up into one of those just a little bit. Okay. Let her be very slightly hidden back in there. This green is mostly sap green that I'm using. We're getting about to the point where I need to go into a small brush here. Now her eyes, they're a yellow green. And then they're going to have dark on that. So, and then we need to be aware that there's a highlight. The highlight is at the top. So I don't want to just paint these blank. I want to leave a little highlight behind. Just a little shadowed there. A little highlight on that side of the eyes. This side here doesn't have the highlight. It's maybe a little brighter yellow than she actually is, but it might not hurt to overemphasize that. And then just a touch of brown. Oops, that's green. It's okay. I think it actually looks better. Just a little touch of dark in there, and then once those are totally dry, then I'll do the shadowing. Now, as long as I'm careful and don't actually get into her eye here, I could do a little shadowing here. Just have to be very careful not to get this into her eye, because otherwise it'll bleed right into it because it's wet. And that comes across the nose. Her nose is going to need a little bit more work on it. Let's see if I can lift with this little tiny brush some of that whisker stuff. And she's got whisker stuff down here too. I might end up, if this doesn't lift out, I'm just rubbing with the tip of my brush. She's got some shorter ones. It has to be dark behind for this kind of a lift to work. And something that will lift fairly easily, like burnt sienna. Burnt sienna has enough particulate matter in it that it has something for you to lift off once it's dry. And of course it has to be 100% dry before you can do this kind of a lift. And then I know she's got some whiskers coming out this other side. I just don't see them back in there particularly. So let's just put them in so she doesn't look like doesn't have whiskers. Very nice. All right. Now, that dragonfly, oh, her favorite are the orange ones, but then we're going to suddenly have a big orange spot in there that I'll have to deal with by putting something else in. But, oh, I do love those orange ones. Let's just do an orange one. We get these great big orange dragonflies in the yard, and she dearly loves them. They can really stand out. What's going to happen is that I need to put some orange elsewhere in the painting. So that it isn't the only orange spot. And use some of this brown. And her tail feels like it needs some more fuzzies. Light but not white. Let's lighten that just a touch. Maybe that's what it needed. Oh, that's better. That's better. All right, now. So I'm using a number 6. Let's go into the number 1 brush to do around those eyes. Yes, that's dry. So then what's going to happen is she has this beautiful little eye makeup, And this will then make her eyes really stand out. And I've got to make sure that I've got a small enough bit on here. When I load the brush, it sort of fattens it a little bit. And when I want to do a really fine line like this, I need to be sure I don't have too much paint on the brush. And then her eye, dark part of her eye comes down in there. Ah, beautiful. That comes out in a little line. Get your head out of there, Margaret. And then her nose circles across there, comes down. Ah, yes, nice. And then maybe just a little darker right there. Seeing a little darkness right under her foot there. I'm seeing that maybe this needs to go darker up in here. Oh, darn.
Call from unavailable. Call from unavailable.
All right, I just had a phone call that we're going to erase out of here. A couple little spots there. I think we're getting really close to having this done. Yeah, a couple of those stems in here being a little darker so that they're a contrast out dark against the light background is good. Let's get this all the way out of the picture. You know, in my photograph, I'm actually seeing more dark area back behind there, but I don't necessarily want to put more dark area back in there. We can do this as a little bit darker area just because that's the edge of the pond reflection coming in there. Okay, where else? Let's just lighten this just a hair down in here. Just feeling like that got too dark in underneath of there. Oh, this might be a mistake, but I just feel like this needs just a wee more color here. Oh yeah, that helps bring her eyes out a little more. And that yellow, let's put some of it back in here somewhere. And what else needs to be done? Feeling like her face needed just a touch more something here. Maybe right in there by the eye. Okay. And this could be a little darker gray right back there. that whisker across. Sometimes things just have to cross over something to look right. Okay, I think I should declare this done. Although I see one more little tiny thing that maybe would help to help identify what's going on here. Okay, Margaret, stop. Stop. And I'm not going to worry about that one spot up there. So she's got a little dark spot in there. Mhm. I did a couple of finishing touches on this to sort of tie things together, and I just looking through my camera up here, I can see one other place that's bothering me here. I didn't like those little hard ends on what that was. And then let's just lighten the body of that guy just a touch. Okay, so so the finishing on this, still keeping it very loose, just getting enough detail in there, getting some diagonal lines that sort of take your eye into the cat, and just that feeling of the color sort of swirling around the cat, but then this focus is on the cat's face, looking toward the dragonfly. So keep it simple. It's always hard to keep it simple. Sometimes these little hard lines around the edge of something are too hard, so I just want to soften as it comes out into the body of things here. Okay, that's done, and then I'll take a solid picture of it as well.